At the end of 2020, public debt was at the highest level ever, both in advanced economies and even in emerging market economies, exceeding the peak after World War II. How did we get there? We got there because we spent a lot during COVID, but actually over the previous 20 years, governments had been borrowing more and more and being able to sustain it because interest rates on government debt were lower and lower. So the amount they had to pay every year was actually pretty flat. Since then, debt has come down, partly because with inflation, we've had an increase in nominal incomes, we've had an increase in the pounds produced. That means that the value of each pound is lower, and since those debts are in pounds, that amount of debt is now worth less, and so some of the debt as a ratio of GDP has fallen. This inflating wave of the debt is always simply a temporary phenomenon, and the key question is, are interest rates going to stay at such record low levels as they were in the previous 20 years after this inflation fighting episode goes away? And here I think there's reasons for serious concern. First, because bondholders, lenders to governments are going to start requiring higher interest rates to compensate them for the risk that we may have another episode of inflation. Second, because geopolitical tensions mean that all of those buyers of gilts and bunds and treasury bills, that is the debt of the advanced economies, is not going to be as high because you're not going to have as many countries in South Asia willing to park their money in the West. Third, because we have large investment projects having to do with climate transition that will absorb a lot of resources away from investing in public debt to investing instead in those transition projects. And fourth, because demographics imply that the aging population becomes an aged population, and we go from a lot of middle-aged households saving for retirement to a lot of older households dissaving in order to sustain their retirement. All of this will imply that interest rates on government debt will rise by 1-2% permanently. The pressure on paying for the very big stock of debt gets higher, and sadly, we will require higher taxes and lower public spending over the next decade.